Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're beginning chapter 56, entitled The Shamantaka Jewel. We should listen to this pastime very carefully because there's a special phal at the end of this pastime. And that is anyone who is suffering from infamy, bad reputation, sinful reactions, just by hearing this story, all of that is eradicated. The Shamantaka Jewel. This chapter describes how Lord Krishna recovered the Shamantaka jewel to allay false accusations against him and married the daughters of Jambavan and Satrajit. By enacting the pastime involving the Shamantaka jewel, the Lord demonstrated the futility of material wealth. When Sukadeva Goswami mentioned that King Satrajit offended Lord Krishna on account of the Shamantaka jewel, this is the first sloka that we'll be reading, that's when it's mentioned. King Parīkṣit became curious to hear the details of this incident. Thus Sukadeva Goswami narrated the story. King Satrajit received the Shamantaka gem by the grace of his best well-wisher, the sun god Surya. After fastening the gem to a chain, which he then hung around his neck, Satrajit traveled to Dwarka. The residents, thinking he was the sun god himself, went to Krishna and told him that Lord Surya had come to take his audience. But Krishna replied that the man who had come was not Surya, but King Satrajit, who looked extremely effulgent because he was wearing the Shamantaka jewel. In Dwarka, Satrajit installed the precious stone on a special altar in his home. Every day the gem produced a large quantity of gold, and it had the additional power of assuring that wherever it was properly worshipped, no calamity could occur. On one occasion, Lord Sri Krishna requested Satrajit to give the gem to the king of the Yadus, Ugrasen, but Satrajit refused, obsessed as he was with greed. Shortly thereafter, Satrajit's brother, Prasena, left the city to hunt on horseback, wearing the Shamantaka jewel on his neck. On the road, a lion killed Prasena and took the jewel away to a mountain cave, where the king of the bears, Jambavan, happened to be living. Jambavan killed the lion and gave the jewel to his son to play with. When King Satrajit's brother did not return, the king presumed that Sri Krishna had killed him for the Shamantaka gem. Lord Krishna heard about this rumor circulating among the general populace, and to clear his name, he went with some of the citizens to find Prasena. Following his path, they eventually found his body and that of his horse lying on the road. Further on, they saw the body of the lion Jambavan had killed. Lord Krishna told the citizens to remain outside the cave while he went in to investigate. The Lord entered Jambavan's cave and saw the Shamantaka jewel lying next to a child. But when Krishna tried to take the jewel, the child's nurse cried out in alarm, bringing Jambavan quickly to the scene. Jambavan considered Krishna an ordinary man and began fighting with him. For 28 days continuously the two fought, until finally Jambavan grew weak from the Lord's blows. Now understanding that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Jambavan began to praise him. The Lord touched Jambavan with his lotus hand, dispelling his fear, and then explained everything about the jewel. With great devotion, Jambavan gladly presented the Shamantaka jewel to the Lord, together with his unmarried daughter Jambavati. Meanwhile, Lord Krishna's companions, having waited 12 days for Krishna to come out of the cave, returned to Dwarka despondent. All of Krishna's friends and family members became extremely sorrowful and began regularly worshipping goddess Durga to assure the Lord's safe return. Even as they performed this worship, Lord Krishna entered the city in the company of his new wife. He summoned Satyajit to the royal assembly and, after recounting to him the entire story of the Shamantaka jewel's recovery, gave the jewel back to him. Satyajit accepted the jewel, but with great shame and remorse. He went back to his home, and there he decided to offer Lord Krishna not only the jewel, but also his daughter, so as to atone for the offense he had committed against the Lord's lotus feet. Shri Krishna accepted the hand of Satyajit's daughter Satyabhama, who was endowed with all divine qualities, but the jewel he refused, returning it to King Satyajit. Now we're going to do the first 11 slokas. The first 10 have no purport, and 11 has just a very short purport. So we've been asked to only read the translation of the first 10. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, having offended Lord Krishna, Satyajit tried as best he could to atone by presenting him with his daughter and the Shamantaka jewel. Text 2. Maharaj Parīkṣit inquired, O Brahman, what did King Satyajit do to offend Lord Krishna? Where did he get the Shamantaka jewel? And why did he give his daughter to the Supreme Lord? Text 3. Sukadeva Goswami said, Surya, the sun god, felt great affection for his devotee Satyajit. Acting as his greatest friend, the demigod gave him the jewel called Shamantaka as a token of his satisfaction. Text 4. Wearing the jewel on his neck, Satyajit entered Dwarka. He shone as brightly as the sun itself, O king, and thus he went unrecognized because of the jewel's effulgence. Text 5. As the people looked at Satyajit from a distance, his brilliance blinded them. They presumed he was the sun god Surya, and went to tell Lord Krishna, who was at that time playing at dice. Text 6. The residents of Dwarka said, Obeisance unto you, O Narayan, O holder of the conch, disc, and club, O lotus-eyed Damodar, O Govinda, O cherished descendant of Yadu. Text 7. Lord Savita has come to see you, O Lord of the universe. He is blinding everyone's eyes with his intensely effulgent rays. Text 8. The most exalted demigods in the three worlds are certainly anxious to seek you out, O Lord, now that you have hidden yourself among the Yadu dynasty. Thus the unborn sun god has come to see you here. Text 9. Sukadeva Goswami continued, hearing these innocent words, the lotus-eyed Lord smiled broadly and said, This is not the sun god Ravi, but rather Satyajit, who is glowing because of his jewel. Text 10. King Satyajit entered his opulent home, festively executing auspicious rituals. He had qualified Brahmins install the Shamantaka jewel in the house's temple room. Now we can repeat text 11. It has 6 lines to it. Dine svarṇa-bhārān aṣṭau sṛjati prabho durbhikṣa-māry-ariṣṭāni sarpādhi-vyādhayo śubhāḥ na santi māyinas tatra yatrāste bhyarcito maṇiḥ. Others can do now. Matajis? We'll do word for word now. Dine, dine, day after day. Svarṇa of gold. Bhārān, bhāras, a measure of weight. Aṣṭau, 8. Saha, it. Sṛjati, would produce. Prabho, O Master. Parīkṣit Mahārāja. Durbhikṣa, famine. Māri, untimely deaths. ariṣṭāni, catastrophes. Sarpa, snake, bites. Ādhi, mental disorders. Vyādhayaḥ, diseases. aśubhāḥ, inauspicious. Na santi, there are none. Māyinas, cheaters. Tatra, there. Yatra, where. Aste, it is present. Abhyarcitaḥ, properly worshipped. Māniḥ, the gem. Translation. Each day the gem would produce 8 bhāras of gold, my dear Prabhu, and the place in which it was kept and properly worshipped would be free of calamities such as famine or untimely death, and also of evils like snake bites, mental and physical disorders, and the presence of deceitful persons. We can repeat. Each day the gem would produce 8 bhāras of gold, my dear Prabhu, and the place in which it was kept and properly worshipped would be free of calamities such as famine or untimely death, and also of evils like snake bites, mental and physical disorders, and the presence of deceitful persons. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami gives the following shastric reference concerning the bhara. Chaturbir vrihibir gunjam gunja pancha panam panan aṣṭau dharanam aṣṭau cha karsham tangs chatura palam tulam pala shatam prahur bhara syad vinshatis tula. 4 rice grains are called 1 gunja, 5 gunjas, 1 pana, 8 panas, 1 karsha, 4 karshas, 1 pala, and 100 palas, 1 tula. 20 tulas make up 1 bhara. Since there are about 3,700 grains of rice in an ounce, the Shamantaka jewel was producing approximately 170 pounds of gold every day. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnivari Paschati Deshatarne. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So as Parīkṣit Mahārāja is sitting with Sukadeva Goswami, Sukadeva Goswami, just as in the last chapter, although it wasn't chronologically in order, he explained an entire pastime in one chapter that we studied about Pradumna, his birth, his growth, how he killed Sambara and then returned to Dwarka to his mother and father. Now in the next 2 chapters, we'll have a description of the Leela surrounding this very powerful and bright Shamantaka jewel. Now, where did this Shamantaka jewel come from? According to what Sukadeva Goswami says here, Satyajit, who was a great devotee of the sun god Ravi, Savita, he has many names, Surya, he approached his worshipable Lord with 2 requests. That first, he had no children. He wanted a wonderful child. And second, when he had approached the Lord, he saw that the Lord had this magnificent, brilliant gem. So he asked the Lord if he could also receive the gem from him. Now, where did Suryadev get this gem? That is explained by Rupa Goswami. We remember way back in the Braja Leela how one night, a beautiful Purnima night, the beginning of Holi, Krishna and Balaram decided to enjoy with their many gopis. And they went to have rasa dance here in Braj. At the same time, Kamsa had sent one of his yaksha followers, whose name was Shankachura, to see all these beautiful girls and how Shankachura was planning to take these girls and give them to Kamsa as a gift. So he tried to steal the gopis. And Krishna then chased Shankachura. He had a brilliant gem on his head. Krishna killed Shankachura very easily, took that jewel, and because there were so many young, beautiful girlfriends of his, he didn't want to favor one over the other, so he gave the jewel to Balaram. And later Balaram gave that jewel to Srimati Radharani, who was the jewel amongst all the gopis. Now when Krishna left Braja, and Radharani and the gopis, all of the inhabitants of Vrindavan were suffering in this 10th canto. It's explained that just as gold, when you want to test gold, you put it into fire to test its purity. So just as when we test gold, it's burned in fire, so Krishna put all of the inhabitants of Vrindavan into the burning fire of separation from him to test their purity. So Radharani, all the gopis, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan were suffering in this fire of separation. And after some time, although there was some remittance of pain, because as soon as they saw the beautiful places in Braj, they could remember all the pastimes of Krishna. But Radharani could not bear the separation, and she decided to enter the Jamuna with her closest friend, Vishaka. Holding hands together, they entered the Jamuna, and we remember that Radharani had been recommended by Gargacharya to worship the sun god. That's why we have Surya Kund. There's so many pastimes when Radharani would go to worship the sun god, forgetting material benefits like many cows for her husband, Abhimanyu. But actually she was worshiping the sun god because Krishna, he would play the part of the pujari, and it was a wonderful opportunity for them to meet together. So she, having worshipped the sun god, and Vishaka, she was actually the daughter of the sun god. So when they entered the big waves of the Jamuna, the sun god, out of compassion for them both, his supermost worshipper and his own daughter, took them to his sun planet. And Radharani, she had the Shamantaka jewel on her at that time, she would never give it up because it was given to her by Balaram. So when they reached the sun planet, just like you would give someone a flower garland, she handed over the Shamantaka jewel as a gift to her worshipable demigod, Suryadev. That's how he got the Shamantaka jewel, from Srimati Radharani. Then, when Satyajit worshipped Suryadev, Suryadev blessed him with the two things that he had requested. He gave the jewel to Satyajit, and he also gave the best of devotees to Satyajit, who was Srimati Radharani, as his daughter, and that was Satyabhama. Now Satyabhama, she is counted as the third wife of Krishna. How is that? Because we'll read in these next two chapters how what happened was Satyajit, he was a Yadava king. He was called Satyajit Yadav. And it's not that the Yadav dynasty was only contained within Dwarka. The whole area, all of the Bhoja, many dynasties were under the supervision of Maharaj Ugrasen. Once Kamsa was killed, they formed a very powerful contingency of dynasties. So Satyajit, he was one of the Yadu kings. And when he received this gem, he decided to visit Dwarka to show off his opulence to the other Yadus. And then he decided to stay within Dwarka and in his home set up the proper worship of this jewel. Because this jewel was producing 20 bhāras, 20 tola. 20 tulas make up one bhāra. Right. 20 tulas make up one bhāra, and he was receiving 8 bhāras. So a tula, a bhāra is 21 pounds. Pounds is what's the measurement in the Western countries. A pound is like 1.6 kilos. Yeah. The other way around?
Yeah, the kilo is more than the pound. Pounds about 500
Yes.
grams.
Right, 1.6 kilos is 1 pound. No. 1 pound.
26 pounds of 1 kilo.
Okay. It's a lot of gold. And we have to remember this is the end of Kali Yuga. It's coming to the end, just before Krishna completes his pastimes, which won't be much longer, because after he marries Jambavati, the first son is Samba, and Samba was the cause of the Musal Lila. So it's all going to happen very soon. So when Maharaj Parīkṣit was giving a place for Kali to stay, Kali was always there, but he had to hide because Maharaj Parīkṣit was such a powerful king. And when he gave the places that wherever there's prostitution, wherever there's gambling, wherever there's meat eating, and wherever there's the other intoxication. And then Kali said to him, but none of those things they're not in your kingdom. Where am I going to stay? So then he gave a concession, wherever gold is being hoarded. Because wherever you hoard gold, all of those things will naturally come. So here was the perfect example. Sṛjati, he got this wonderful material benefit of this jewel, which was a spiritual jewel coming from Srimati Radharani. But out of greed, when Krishna asked him, because Krishna wanted to set a precedence amongst all of the inhabitants, that whatever wonderful thing you have, it should be given to the king, because the king will then distribute it properly. So Krishna, through the emissary of Uddhava, went and he said to Sṛjati, you should give this is Krishna's desire, you give it to Ugrasen. And Sṛjati, out of greed, would not give that jewel, and he continued to worship it. And then, when his brother took that jewel, again out of false ahankar, just to show the glory of the family, sometimes, you have something very valuable, you want to show it off to other people. He took it out on a hunting expedition, and there a lion killed him, killed the horse, took the jewel, and then enters a wonderful personality, Jambavan. Now, who is Jambavan? Jambavan, he was born from the yawning of Lord Brahma, Jimba. That's where the name Jambavan comes from. And you'll see in our Bhagavad Gita that when Krishna explains whatever you do in this lifetime, you get a corresponding body. So if someone sleeps too much, they have the picture there. What do they become? A bear. Why? Because bears hibernate. In the cold weather, when it gets too cold to go out hunting and gathering food, for 6 months, they eat and eat and eat for 6 months. And then after eating so much, they go into a cave and lie down, and they sleep for the next 6 months. And all their body fat is used up during their hibernation time. All their bodily functions reduce, so their bodily fat is used up in those 6 months. They don't have to eat. So bears are very famous for sleeping. But Jambavan, having come directly from Lord Brahma, he was a very great devotee. And he, from Satya Yuga on to this time present, which is the end of Dwapara Yuga, in Satya Yuga he was an associate of Vamanadev. When Vamanadev came to trick Bali, and Vamanadev put his foot up in the air to cover the entire universe, Jambavan was there and circled his whole leg and his whole body 21 times. And he got a benediction that he would be able in each yuga to have association with the Lord in his different pastimes. That was Satya Yuga. And then in Treta Yuga, we know he played such a pivotal role in the war between Lord Ram and Ravana. And he reminded Ram at that time, well, he reminded Krishna, after he recognized Krishna as his worshipable Lord Ram, he said, do you remember how we were tossing the heads of Ravana back and forth between the two of us? So it was he who reminded Ram that you are the Supreme Lord. You're playing as an ordinary king, but actually you're the Supreme Lord, and you can easily overcome this ocean to reach Sita in Lanka. And then Ram took up his forces, and they made the bridge, and they were able to defeat Ravana. So he was there with Ram, and this benediction, actually he got a benediction that he would be killed by the Lord's chakra, that if I have to die at any time, let me be killed by your chakra. So when Krishna entered his cave to retrieve the Shamantaka jewel, Jambavan, thinking that Krishna was an ordinary human being who had just come to steal the jewel, began fighting with him. He was very powerful. And you'll see throughout Krishna's pastimes, we don't just concentrate on the conjugal affairs of the Lord. Krishna has so many different exchanges with his devotees, and he loves to fight. So he took this opportunity to fight with one of his most powerful devotees, 28 days. He didn't stop like with Jarasandha, and they became friends in the evening. Day and night for 28 days, he fought with Jambavan. Jambavan did not want him to take that jewel. He wanted that jewel to be one of the playthings for his son. So they were fighting. Finally, when he was just at the end of his strength, he realized, no one could be as powerful as my Lord Ram. This must be Ram in another form. So then he submitted himself to Lord Krishna, and he gave his daughter Jambavati. Now, who is Jambavati? We heard in the Leela of how Krishna married Rukmini that she was actually, Jambavan took part in that also. He had taken, Jambavan was ordered by Durga Devi, Vindhyachal Devi, to take one of these sisters, Chandravali, and give her to Bhishmaka as a daughter. So he took her over there. And then another time he was flying by, and after Radharani and Vishaka entered into the Jamuna River, Lalita had no reason to live anymore because Radharani had left her. She decided that she would give up her life by jumping off of the high Govardhan hill. So she went to the top of Govardhan hill, and as she was jumping, Jambavan flew by and captured her. And he flew on and kept her in his cave and adopted her. He was the foster father then of Lalita, and he gave her the name Jambavati. Now this is all a setup that Rupa Goswami explains behind the scenes, how Krishna then was able to fulfill all the desires of the gopis of Vrindavan to marry them all. We'll read in the next chapter, 58, how Krishna then married the 5 next queens after marrying these principal 3 queens. That was Rukmini, then Jambavati, and now Satyabhama, who's Chandravali, Lalita, and Radharani. And then we'll read about how Krishna married Vishaka in the form of Kalindi, and all the other gopis will be married by Krishna. And then the 16,000 gopis who also had worshipped Katyayani here, they were waiting for Krishna to fulfill his promise to them. So Katyayani in the form of Kamakya, Kamadevi, that's in what is the name of Guwahati? Yeah, it starts with a P. And that's where Narakasura lived. That was his kingdom. And that's also where Kamakya Devi lived. So she arranged for Narakasura to take all those 16,100 gopis and keep them very carefully there. He never touched them. He was waiting for a proper muhurta, and at that time he was going to marry them all. So they were being kept very carefully by Kamadevi there at that temple where she is and in that whole area, waiting for Krishna to come with Satyabhama and kill Narakasura. So on one level, behind the scenes, the setup was being made that Krishna was going to be marrying all of these queens. On the level that we're reading here in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna was enjoying wonderful combat with Jambavan, and then Jambavan was giving his daughter. Satyajit, now having realized that he had offended the Lord by not giving the jewel to Krishna, he was very ashamed. Now, there's a special Purana that's called the Kalki Purana. You have to read the entire pastimes of Kalki, his appearance, his activities, his purpose for appearing, and then comes to his marriages, just as when we're reading about Krishna's pastimes. So Kalki, in the same manner, because Kalki is Lord Krishna in his last incarnation, he married, and this is so that we can understand that things are not static in Krishna's pastimes. His pastimes, he may have different forms, but his associates go with him in those different avatars. So when he was getting married for the first time, Lakshmi Devi, in the form of Padmavati, who was also Chandravali, who was also Rukmini, he married her. And we know that in the pastime of Krishna marrying Rukmini, when all of the kings saw the beauty of Rukmini, they became stunned and they fell off their horses, they lost consciousness. Well, it was even beyond that in the Kalki Lila. When Padmavati was going to have her Swayamvara, Lord Shiva gave a special benediction to her that any man who looks at you lustfully, he will turn into a woman. So when she had her Swayamvara, all of the kings instantly became women and became her maidservants. And she was so depressed that how am I ever going to get married now? So finally Kalki came and he married her. When they married, all of the women became men again and everybody lived happily ever after. So then there was a second wife. And when Kalki was going to destroy all of the Mlechas and Yavanas, he was going from kingdom to kingdom. Mostly he was killing all of the Mlechas and Yavanas, and the wives were so depressed, and he trained them in bhakti yoga to simply worship the Supreme Lord. They became satisfied. He came to one particular kingdom called, I forget the name, and the king there was actually a great devotee. And his wife was such a pure devotee. So when Kalki came to attack his kingdom, his wife said, "You can't fight with the Supreme Lord. We're his worshipable devotees." He said, No, he likes to fight. I'm going to fight with him and give him pleasure. Because he likes to, if he's going to fight with anyone, he has to fight with his devotees. So he went out and he gave Kalki such a good fight, because Kalki was, on one side of him was the personified Satya Yuga, on the other side of him was the personified Dharma. He had his associates there to set up Satya Yuga again after Kali Yuga was over. And what this wonderful king, his name was Sashidwaja, he was so powerful due to his devotion that he fought with Kalki so brilliantly the Kalki fell down unconscious. And Kalki's two associates went to pick him up. And Sashi-Dwaja, he embraced all three of them, picked them all up, and took them to his palace. And they were both conscious, but Kalki was still unconscious. The fight was so powerful. So when Kalki gained consciousness again, he was very embarrassed. He said, "You brought me to the palace of my enemy?" It's very shameful for a kshatriya. So then Satrajit said, "My dear Lord, you know everything, but for the benefit of your associates, I'll tell you why this has happened." So he told him of his past life. He said, many, many lifetimes previous, I was a vulture, and my wife was my vulture wife. And she lived in a big tree, and they had a nest, and they would fly around looking for dead bodies, rotten flesh to eat. And that was how they lived, because they were vultures. And there was a hunter, and this hunter wanted to catch these vultures for their meat. So he had a tamed vulture, tame meaning it was his pet. And he sent that tame vulture to make friends with these vultures. So they went to the vulture, they said, "You have any meat for us, you can share." And then he captured them both. And this was all in the area of the Gandaki River, where the Shalagram Shilas are. So when he captured those two vultures, he took their two heads, and he picked up some Shalagram Shilas, and he crushed their heads by pounding the Shalagram Shilas on their heads. So because they died touching the Shalagram Shilas, they went to Vaikuntha Loka, and they stayed there for many, many Divya Yugas in Vaikuntha Loka, simply by the touch of Shalagram Shila at the time of their death. Then from Vaikuntha, they went to Brahmaloka to learn the whole process of devotional service from the four Kumaras and Narada Muni. And then from there, they visited Svargalok, the heavenly planets. And at that time, Krishna was arranging for all of the demigods to come and join him in his pastimes here on earth. So the vultures who started in Vaikuntha, went to Brahmaloka, were now in Svargaloka, he took birth as Satrajit. And now he was taking part in Krishna's pastimes on earth. So when Shashi-Dwaja reminded Kalki that I am Satrajit, and you allowed me to be killed. Later on, Satrajit will be killed by Satadanva. Kalki put his head down in shame, because Satrajit, or Shashi-Dwaja, he understood that nothing happens without the desire of the Lord. So Krishna, in this Leela, this particular Shamantaka jewel Leela, he is showing first how even a great devotee who's a member of the Yadu dynasty, who's a great king, when he becomes overcome by lust and greed, he can lose all of his devotion. So that's our first lesson here in this Leela. Second of all, that everything should be offered to the king, whatever valuables we have, just as we learn here, because our Supreme Lords, the King of the temple, the King of our lives, the King of everything, that's Sri Krishna and his brother Balaram, of course. And whatever we have, we offer to them. This is the process. We offer everything to the Supreme Lord, and then he doesn't need anything. He gives it back to his devotees. And this is exactly what Krishna did even with the Shamantaka jewel. When, out of shame, embarrassment, Satrajit offered the jewel and his daughter to Krishna, he said, I'll keep your daughter, but I have no use for this jewel. You take it back, you're worshiping it very nicely. So this is the second lesson that Krishna is teaching us in this particular Leela. The first is we have to be very careful, even as devotees, not to become greedy, not to become lusty for material opulences. The second is whatever we have, whatever opulences we have, anything, qualities we have, we use that, we offer it to Sri Krishna. And then Krishna himself, because the Dwarka city, it was a fortress. No one could enter Dwarka. There were so many guards, huge walls. It was contained. All of the inhabitants, they had been transferred from Mathura into Dwarka. There was no outside influence whatsoever. Sometimes Krishna would go to visit Hastinapur. Balaram would go stay in Mithila sometimes, different pastimes. Otherwise, all the inhabitants stayed within the walls of Dwarka for protection from Jarasandha and other demons, such as when Salva came. They were all safe there. So, when Satrajit saw that Prasenna had not come back with the jewel, and his first suspect was Krishna, because Krishna was the only person who had asked for the jewel. So then amongst the people, it happens in any closed community, the rumors started. Rumors started that, oh, it must have been Krishna, he must have killed Prasenna and taken the jewel. So Krishna was getting defamed within his own kingdom. And Krishna had to prove himself that he had never taken the jewel. And that was why the second part of this pastime took place. So that's another thing, that we have to be very careful not to gossip, not to spread rumors, and especially to respect the Supreme Lord, to never doubt his character, because this is the greatest offense, very great offense. And Satrajit, because of this offense, because he doubted the character of Sri Krishna, he could not go back to Godhead at the end of this lifetime. He did not make it. And therefore this whole pastime took place later with Kalki. And at that time, he was able to give his daughter, Rama, as the second wife of Kalki. And he and his wife then, now having shown their devotion, having been completely purified from their previous activities in this pastime, they were able to give up their kingdom, enter into the forest, and attain the supreme abode of the Lord. So these pastimes, it's not just within one avatar of the Lord, one appearance. These personalities, and even ourselves, we hear in the Nectar Devotion, one cannot take up devotional service unless one has previously been engaged in devotional service. This is a lifetime after lifetime eternal process. And therefore we have to guard very carefully against these lessons that Krishna is teaching us here in Srimad Bhagavatam. We have to be very careful to not be enamored by material opulence and wealth. We have to be very careful not to doubt the character of the Supreme Lord. We have to be very careful that whatever we have, we offer to the Supreme Lord in his service, and he gives it back as prasadam to us. So let us keep these lessons. That it sounds like a very interesting story, it makes a great movie and great plays, but there are very important lessons in this particular, these two next chapters that we'll be reading, and we have to bring these lessons into our life, especially no gossip and no rumors, because that can destroy. Just see here Satrajit, what happened. Because he made a rumor about the Supreme Lord, he missed his opportunity to go back to Godhead. And so many different things happen as a result of that. Now, internally, we're understanding on one level how Krishna is fulfilling all the desires of his devotees. Why did he marry each one of these queens? To fulfill their desires, because Krishna has no, he He has no desires to fulfill whatsoever. His desire is to satisfy his devotees. So each one of these wonderful queens, having prayed in their previous appearance as the gopis to become the wife of Krishna, he was now satisfying each one of their desires and making them queens in Dwarka so they could enjoy that pastime of Svakya Ras. All right, so any questions?
One can't take up devotional service unless you perform devotional service. So how does it begin? And also, as you mentioned, all over the world people make stories and comics about fantastic entertainment, just to entertain the mind, but in really modern science and advancement in technology. How can we believe all these stories? And
You mean this story?
that story and all the fantastic stories that are presented in the Bhagavatam and Puranas. Are they just stories, or are they real?
You don't have to believe them if you don't want to, but I'll believe them.
What about devotional service? If you you can't start.
Yes, that's because originally we're all from the spiritual world, and we chose not to serve Krishna, so we've come here. So originally we all belong with Krishna, and we're just going, that's what the name of back to Godhead means. We're going back to our original place. And so when we come here to the material world, we usually Prabhupada explains this, we usually start off as Lord Brahma, and then we...
You're mentioning about devotional service, that one can't take up pure devotional service unless he performed it in the last life or previously, but then where does it begin? How do you begin your devotion?
It began when we were created by Krishna to serve him, because all of us have been created with a particular eternal relationship with him. And at one point we chose, because of our minute independence, we chose not to serve Krishna, so therefore he allowed us to come here to the material world and enjoy without him. So we were always devotees of the Supreme Lord, and now in forgetfulness we're here, and when we come in contact with devotees, gradually we remember our eternal relationship with Krishna. So that is the beginning. The beginning is when we were originally created with a particular eternal relationship with Krishna. That's the beginning. And when we choose not to serve him, sometimes when the alarm goes off in the morning, we just said, well, I got to sleep in tonight, this morning, you know. So sometimes we choose not to serve Krishna, and then our day becomes inauspicious, right? We make that choice. The alarm went off, but we didn't wake up. We decided we'd rather stay in ignorance. So we all know what the process is, but we choose not to follow it from day to day. So we all know that we're eternal servants of Krishna. We hear it every single day, that we're eternal servants of Krishna, and Krishna's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we're not this body. But we choose not to serve him sometimes, and our inauspiciousness begins at that time, until we meet a devotee, and the devotee reminds us, hey, I didn't see you at Mangalarti today, you know, something like that. So it's all by our own free will that we choose not to serve Krishna. Nobody forces us into Maya. We choose, we embrace Maya. Did that answer your question?
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you for the very nice class. Mataji, you said like as devotees, you know, we wear gold, like earrings and all. So should we wear gold or should we not wear gold at all?
Well, a woman, yes, she should wear her gold. And in fact, there was one devotee here, Vishvadevi. She was married to Prithuputra. They came here. In the very beginning, she used to make the Lord's mukuts every day. And he decided to take sannyas. After he took sannyas, she asked Srila Prabhupada what should she do with her golden ornaments. And you have to ask her what, I don't remember exactly what he told her, because then she was a widow. But yes, women who are married they do have gold and ornaments. That's their wealth. But Prabhupada in 1976, there was a GBC meeting, and Prabhupada, he was explaining the Dharma of women, and he was saying that these golden ornaments and dressing very attractively, that's for when the woman is at home just with her husband. That's for the pleasure of her husband only. But when we're in public, we should dress very simply, because we don't want to attract other men when we're outside of the house. So those who are married women, they dress very attractively and wear their ornaments for the pleasure of their husbands. Otherwise, they're not interested in dressing attractively and exposing their ornaments to people other than their husband. So Prabhupada recommended at that time that we dress simply. The women dress simply in ISKCON.
Thank you, Mataji.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, okay.
Thank you. I didn't understood who is Kalki in the story. Who was
Kalki is Krishna
is the avatar
when he came
So he
in the Kali Yuga, and his associates come along with him. For instance, Jambavan came along with Jambavan, who was associated with Vamanadev, and then Ramachandra, he came along and associated with Krishna. Dvivida, he also came along from Ramachandra's Leela. He was a physician. When Lakshman killed Indrajit with a fiery weapon, he got a very high fever. And Dvivida, he cured Lakshman. And Lakshman gave him a benediction that whatever you want, he said, well, let me be killed by your hand. So in this Leela, we'll read later about Dvivida Gorilla, he was killed by Lakshman in the form of Balaram. So all of these eternal associates, they move along with the Lord when he appears in his different Leelas. So that's how Satyajit later became Shashidwaja in the Kalki Leela, because he did not go back to Godhead because of his offense of the Supreme Lord in the Krishna Leela. He was able to attain perfection in the Kalki Leela. Okay? Any more questions?
Hare Krishna. Mataji, right at the beginning, when you were reading a summary,
Yes.
you said at the end of this chapter there's a benediction.
Yes.
Shrutifal.
You want to hear that benediction? It's the end of the next chapter. This narration, rich with description of the prowess of Lord Sri Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, removes sinful reactions and bestows all auspiciousness. Anyone who recites, hears, or remembers it will drive away his own infamy and sins and attain peace.
Yeah. So my question was, we sometimes other chapters also we hear such benedictions. You will get riches, you will be freed from diseases like that.
Yes,
But we also hear Bhagavatam's Amala Puran
yes.
and our Acharyas Prabhupada condemn Karma Kanda. Sometimes I am not able to reconcile. This looks like little bit Karma Kanda kind of a not here exactly, but in sometimes we see you'll get riches, you'll get strength and free from diseases like that.
Okay, but we're not talking about those benedictions. We're talking about this benediction. And there's nothing material about this. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. You have a question?
Yes, Hare Krishna. It's about sorry, I lost it. Okay, I guess I was just taken away from it.
Okay, you can ask later then. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.